She all fixed up.
No way, really? Dude, thank you so much, bro.
Yeah, no problem. So I get a phone call. He says, Alec, I need your help. I got a flashing check engine light. My truck's low on coolant and it's overheating. What does that mean? It means you got an expensive repair bill. But it was my brother that was calling and I'm the family mechanic. So here is his truck. Let's see if we can fix it and save him some money. What we're working on today is a 2002 Toyota Tundra with a 4.7 liter I-Force V8 in it. It's got 268K on it. So when the truck showed up yesterday, first thing I did was I plugged in the code scanner and I saw that we have a misfire on 5 and a misfire on 7, both over here on bank 2. So I pulled the ignition coils out, I pulled the spark plugs out, I noticed that cylinder number 5 spark plug was loose. It was in there just hand tight. And when I pulled out the ignition coil for cylinder number 7, the boot got stuck down there and it came apart in 2 pieces. So I had to pick it out and mangle it all up. I attempted to swap around spark plugs and ignition coils because that's what I do for a misfire diagnosis. Let's say 5 is misfiring, I'll pull out the ignition coil and I'll swap it to 6, and then I'll take the spark plug from 7 and I'll swap it with 5. So that way I know if it follows to 6, it was the ignition coil. If it follows to 7, it was the spark plug. I got number 5 to go away, but number 7 wanted to stay. So I just knew that these spark plugs and ignition coils might not be good. So I told my brother, let's order up some plugs and coils and then we'll continue that diagnosis. When I got the truck, I noticed that the coolant bottle was a little low. My brother said he topped it off. He also said that he noticed that the upper and lower radiator hoses were different temperatures, which usually indicates a stuck thermostat. So my mind started going there, and then I saw some coolant kind of sprayed all out over here. Now when I open the hood of a car or a truck and I see coolant here on top of the radiator, on top of the fan shroud, on top of the coolant hose, usually indicates a coolant leak of some type. I looked down and I could see some coolant building up in this seam. You can even see it's wet, and this radiator is starting to turn really brown, just like a BMW coolant hose when it gets really tired. So I put the cooling system pressure tester on it, and let me show you what I found. Now with just a couple PSI in the cooling system, we can already hear and see our leak. We have a hairline crack down here on the radiator, and this thing is just pissing out of the front. But I'm not surprised. This radiator looks original, and it's got this brown look to it, especially right over here by this upper radiator hose collar. You can see that brown spotting. Same thing happens with BMW plastic. When it gets old and tired, it starts to turn brown, and you can tell that it's going to fail soon. Now you might be thinking, misfires all across the board, potential stuck thermostat, potential overheating. Sounds like it could be a head gasket issue. And that's what I was thinking too. I haven't done a compression test on it yet, but I decided let's order spark plugs, ignition coils, radiator, thermostat, upper hose, lower hose, and then go from there. So now we're going to jump into fixing the ignition system and see if it's actually a head gasket or not. Now before we tear it apart, let me show you how it runs. Runs pretty good. Check engine light's on. It starts to flash after it runs for 20 seconds or so, but I assume that's just a computer telling us that it has a hard misfire. It barely feels like it's misfiring, but when I drop it into reverse, put it under a little bit of load, I can feel that misfire start to kick in a little bit. And that's when the check engine light starts flashing. Check engine light is currently on for number 7 and number 3. All right, let's get started with tearing down bank 2. We're going to disconnect all 4 ignition coils. We're going to remove them and then get access to the spark plugs, and we're going to pull those. See, the boot came off for number 6. This was originally number 7. Every time I do, it gets stuck down in the cylinder. So another good reason why we need to get these coils and boots replaced. Can't keep using that thing. It's smoked. Like I said, when I first went down in here to check the spark plugs, ignition coils, and start swapping them around, I noticed that cylinder number 5 was just completely loose. I pulled the spark plug out with my fingers. Having a wobble spark plug socket is super helpful. So here's the spark plugs. They are Denzos. A little bit of discoloration on 2 of them. Didn't see anything obviously wrong with them though. I'm gonna get the top of this air box removed here so you guys have a little bit better angle for bank 1 over here. Disconnect the MAF. Disconnect this hose clamp. Now we can start on bank 1. Wow, that one was loose too. So there's another loose spark plug. There's another loose spark plug. Still, like literally, I barely turned it, it came loose. This one's loose. And this one's loose. All 4 spark plugs on this bank 1 were loose. And here's a look at the plugs. Nothing out of the ordinary, but the threads on every single spark plug on bank 1 were left loose. Now before we go throw spark plugs and coils in it, I think we should check compression just to do our due diligence. So I'm going to use my compression tester here. Now if you guys need any of this stuff, compression tester, cooling system pressure tester, I'll put links in the description for you. So first we're going to thread in our adapter, figure out what spark plug thread we need for it. We're just going to go in hand tight. Then we're going to connect our compression tester adapter. Now we're going to go crank the car over for like 7 revolutions and see what pressure we get. So we got 180, that is solid. That's a healthy engine, for cylinder number 1 at least. 170, so still good. 160, not bad. That was one of the misfire cylinders here, number 3. And 180. So 180, 170, 160, 180. All still decently high. Anything in the mid to high 100s is usually pretty good. If it was double digits, down below 100, I'd be concerned. Okay, now for bank 2, we're starting on cylinder number 5. This one's 170. Number 6 is 170. Number 7, our problem cylinder, 170. Number 8, 160, 165. So we have a healthy engine. We have plenty of good compression, all over 150 PSI across both banks, all 8 cylinders. So that's why I think this is probably an ignition coil and spark plug issue, but I couldn't confidently confirm that because I just didn't feel like these spark plugs and ignition coils were known good. Also, while my brother was here and I was first diagnosing this thing, after I pulled the spark plugs out, I sent a borescope down and I took a look and I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. So for parts, I ordered from Rock Auto, not sponsored. I would have used FCP Euro, but they don't carry Toyota. We got a bunch of Bremy ignition coils, Motorrad OE thermostat. In this box, we got the upper and lower radiator hose. We got a jug of Toyota coolant. We got another jug of Toyota coolant. A thermostat. I don't know why there was 2 ordered. Got a thermostat seal. We got some NGK spark plugs. Oh, you know what? This is a radiator cap. This is the thermostat. And of course, we got a new Denso radiator. Now to start things off, I want to put these NGK spark plugs in there and then get all the ignition coils back in. And we can fire it up, clear the check engine light, and see how this thing runs. Because if it's running rough, and we have a cylinder number 7 misfire again, we got a bigger issue than spark plugs and ignition coils. Although I think we're going to get lucky. So for spark plugs, we're using these NGK BKR6EYA 7990. I tried to order OE on everything. OE ignition coils, OE spark plugs, OE thermostat, OE radiator. Costs a little bit of extra money, but you know you're getting good quality. Also on the back here, it gives you torque specs for iron heads and aluminum heads. All right, let's start by putting in these new spark plugs. You always want to thread spark plugs in by hand. You don't have to run them down all the way by hand, but at least just get them started by hand. You don't want to cross thread a cylinder head. Now we're going to torque these to spec to 21 foot-pounds. Now we can toss in our new ignition coils. All right, it's time to clear the check engine light, fire it up, and see how she runs. I think she's going to be fixed up. If it's not, we got bigger issues. Potential wiring to the ignition coils, fuel injector issue, cylinder head issue, I don't know. It's also a good idea to have a code scanner because just having the mass airflow sensor unplugged and turning it over for the compression test, we're going to trigger mass airflow sensor faults. All right, we're all cleared. No check engine light. All deleted. Let's fire it up. Fingers crossed. Pretty smooth so far. Let's drop it into nice, she's idling a lot better. Other than that though, it is a night and day difference. It is not misfiring under load anymore, so I think it just happened to be some faulty ignition coils and spark plugs, and just swapping them around, you know, whatever went to number 7 was still gonna misfire again. Let's give it another start up. Huge difference from what it was doing before. Throw it into drive, give it a little bit of load, give it a slight power brake, pushing my foot on the brake pedal really hard, just giving it a little accelerator, putting it under load while it's sitting here stationary. But yeah, night and day difference. I think that really fixed up the misfire. So as long as it stays like this, we can move over to the cooling system. Yeah, the engine seems to be fixed. She's running real smooth. I think those ignition coils and spark plugs did the trick. Feels really smooth for a 260,000 mile gasoline truck. But that's gonna give me a little bit of peace of mind tonight while I'm sleeping, knowing that we're not dealing with a head gasket issue or anything having to do with the fuel injectors or the valve train. It's 8 o'clock, I'm gonna shut down for the night, and then I'll be out here tomorrow morning. We'll start tearing into this cooling system. Day 2, it is cold. Let's get the belly pan off, drain the coolant, start on the radiator. Okay, let's get the coolant out of this thing. Got a drain petcock here. Little white guy. Nice. So while that's draining, I'm gonna start working on this fan clutch. You can see there's a couple 10 to 12 millimeter bolts there. So I'm gonna rotate it around, knock all 4 of those out, and then disconnect this fan. Pulley wants to spin, but maybe we can just grab this belt. When a water pump or a fan clutch and stuff like that is spinning when you don't want it to, I like to take a screwdriver, wedge it in between the nuts. Dang, that sucker's on there tight. What I could do is grab another wrench and hold it in the tightening direction while I break that one loose. Looks like we got some 10 millimeter bolts up top here. I think we'll have to remove this upper hose to get the fan shroud out. Oh yeah, look at that discoloration. I see this spotting underneath this hose connection. That's just like cancer of the plastic. It's dry, it's brittle, it's gonna crack no matter what. You see this type of stuff on your coolant hoses or any of your plastic components, it's time to replace. Okay, we got 2 more bolts down below. Magnetic socket for the win. One more buried over here. Let's get this upper radiator hose removed completely. Just get it out of our way. Let's disconnect this little hose clamp for the overflow hose. Alright, so here's a look with the fan and the shroud removed. We still have the lower radiator hose to remove. These 2 cooler lines. We have this bolt right here and this bolt right here. Then we should be able to slide it forward and up and out. Get out of here, chickens. Now when hoses get stuck like this, I like to use a radiator pick tool like this and slip it up and run it around. And you're gonna break the seal loose for the hose, so it's not just molded and stuck to the plastic anymore. So just try to run it up around the bulk of the hose. They usually have a dull tip on them, so if you're reusing your hoses, you won't break them. But just getting in there and breaking that seal. Let's pull this clamp for the next one. Now we're gonna have trans fluid inside this radiator, so we'll have to top it off. I'll have to go find what trans fluid. Okay, now we can remove the radiator bolts here. There's 2 more bolts identical on the bottom, so let me pull those. Okay, now this thing should want to come up and out. Good thing I bought a radiator cap, although I'm a little worried. Oh, I know why. I ended up removing these bolts and removed it from the brackets on the side, so the new radiator comes with those. This one is already removed, so I can get access to the hardware. One there, one down there, another one there, another one there. I think we'll pull these brackets out just so they look new and they're all refreshed. Okay, so there's one bracket. There's two. Let's test fit it. All right, it's got some nice little tangs that hold the radiator into the front end, so that's nice. Let's mount this thing back up, huh? Now, before we go too far, I think we're gonna need to focus on the thermostat, get that pulled apart, see what it looks like. Here's our thermostat assembly, so take off our hose clamp for the lower hose. Get this lower radiator hose out. Seems like a lot of stuff on this truck's 12s. She's a bit seized on there. Give it a little love tap. Boy, you are sealed on tight, aren't you? There's a little casting lip right here. I'm gonna try to lever off that. Boy, you are on there tight. Don't want to beat it up too much. We don't want to mar the thermostat housing, so we need to reuse it. Jesus. No way. Either this thing broke or it was broken. Where's the chunk for it? I did break it. I found the chunk that broke off. I could run without it. I could just epoxy it in, but... Alright guys, I got one coming. It's gonna show up tomorrow morning, but I'm gonna clean this one up, see if I can use some JB weld, seal it back up. We got enough room here to throw the nut on the back. It's not gonna impede with the sealing surface because that seal is gonna be here on the inside. So let's clean it up, see if we can JB weld her back together. That rust just welded the stud to the inside of that housing there. Let that stuff dry off real quick. Now I'm just gonna use some JB Weld Clear Weld. 5-minute drying epoxy. Just a little dab there. Little dab there. And I like to save this because when this is dry, you know that's dry. Tight fit right there, perfect. Perfect puzzle piece break. Here's a look glued up. That side looks good. Back side looks good. Bottom looks good. While that cures up, we can start putting these trans lines back together like that. Now, cardboard is a great resource when you're doing coolant repairs, especially the box that the radiator came in. Slap that down on the ground, let it absorb up all the coolant so it's absorbed into the cardboard and not your back. Now we might have to break this loose to get the orientation to our thermostat right, but we'll snug it up just for now. Now the reason why I'm not worried about epoxying that thermostat housing is the seal for the thermostat is right here. And it's going to be far away from where that stud was an issue and where that epoxy is. So the sealing surface is far inside where that stud and where that repair is going to be. So I'm going to take a brush and clean up all this rust off this stud so it doesn't cause us any problems in the future, because that's why that thermostat housing got stuck. It was just rusted tight to this stud. Spray it out with some brake cleaner. Spray off that belt. So for thermostat installation, we got our seal all installed. You see this little tang right here? That's to allow air bubbles to pass through that. So whenever you install the thermostat, you want to install with that at the highest point. put that little hole right up at the top. I'm gonna scuff up this thermostat housing a little bit, because you can see the line on this old thermostat housing and where it made the seal against that gasket. Okay, and I'm just gonna snug these up by hand. I don't know what the torque spec is, but I'm just gonna go light and equal and opposite. Now we can get our lower hose fixed to the thermostat housing. Better put our hose clamp on first. Now hose clamps, you don't want to go crazy tight, because you can just break the hose clamp, it'll strip. Then it'll just keep spinning on you and never get tight. So I like to go just with a screwdriver till it's nice and snug, and then I'll take my thumb and try to spin it. If I can't spin it, it's nice and tight. Then look down, make sure that our lower radiator hose is clear of the pulley right over here for the AC compressor. But we're looking good. Now next step is going to be putting the fan and the fan shroud back in. Our trans lines are back on. Our lower hose is connected. Our thermostat is back in. Thermostat housing is tight. We'll do fan, shroud, and then our upper hose. And then I think we're pretty much done. Throw some coolant in it, figure out how to bleed this thing. Now it looks like this radiator fan shroud is a two-piece design, so you probably unclip it, and that's how you can get the fan out from the bottom. I'm just gonna put it back in the way I took it out. Everything's set up. Start with that. Drop the fan down. Get our fan hardware back in. Now it's good to get it all started, and then once you have all four in, snug them down, because you just never know with fitment issues. It's like getting all 5 lug nuts started first, you know? Now the pulley behind this fan is bolted on by these fan clutch nuts, so it's kind of backing out. So I'm just going to snug down one of these just so I can get these studs a little more exposed. Besides the thermostat housing, this fan is probably the biggest pain. Next step, I'm going to get this upper radiator hose fitted. Just going to buff this hose connection here real quick. Got our new upper radiator hose. Never want to go too crazy on these plastic radiator necks, especially on the BMWs. The little overflow nipple right here, you can easily snap them off by over torquing them with a screwdriver, because you're putting so much lateral force onto them. These bigger ones, a little harder to do. If it's a used radiator and it's old, it can break, but always be cautious on these little nipples. And then one more piece of hardware that connects this, I think it's an AC hose, right up here. Now I was doing some research for this bleed procedure online, and everybody was saying just a gravity bleed, but I don't like gravity bleeding. Most vehicles have a factory bleed nipple somewhere, and I just want to find the location on this one and do the bleed properly, because it just takes all the guesswork out of having bubbles in the cooling system. So everybody's saying there's a bleed valve down here. Remove the throttle cover, pull the air hose out of the way. There is nothing down here. This bolt runs down for this housing. This bolt runs down for that housing. There's some throttle body stuff. There's a coolant pipe back here, but there is no bleed valve. So I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way. Fill the system up. I'm going to pressure test it, and then we'll just run it with the cap off and burp it out, squeeze the hoses, and just run it till we get a nice steady flow, and then consistently check it over the next couple days. All right, let's get her filled up. We got some Azen pink Toyota coolant, OEM coolant. It's already pre-mixed. Okay, before we do the bleed, we need to pressure test the cooling system. So I got a cooling system adapter here for a Toyota. I like to put about 15 PSI in. All right, we'll let that marinate. I'm gonna pop down and check the drain petcock. Just make sure that's nice and tight. Pressure is holding nicely. Let's check fluids while we wait. Brake fluid is up to level, although it is filthy dirty. We need to do a brake flush on this thing. Engine oil at the low mark. Should have some 530 laying around. Yeah, she could use a quart. Washer, okay. Power steering fluid, absolutely filthy, but it's okay. Maybe we'll do a brake flush and a power steering flush in the future on this thing for my brother. I got some Castrol 530 laying around, so we'll throw a quart in it. Cooling system is holding strong, so I'm going to slowly release pressure on this. It's going to want to come back out my adapter. I also got a brand new radiator cap that we're going to put on this thing. Never know if the old radiator cap failed or not. You can test them by connecting your cooling system pressure tester up to a different hose, like the upper or some other hose. You can basically put enough pressure into the system to where this cap is supposed to blow off. Hi, Sage. Come here. Hello. Hi. Hi, puppy. Hello. Hello. How are you? All right, let's get this thing fired up and attempt to bleed it. Now, anytime I'm bleeding a cooling system, I follow the same procedure. Doesn't matter if it's a Toyota or if it's a BMW. First thing I do, fire it up. Then I'm gonna put the AC controls on high. I'm gonna set it to defroster. I'm gonna put it to max heat. That way, we're gonna be moving coolant through the heater core. And when I get a hot defroster, I know that there's no more bubbles in the heater core and we're good to go. What I read online for bleeding this engine was to leave the radiator cap off, and then once you have a nice steady flow and it's gotten all the air bubbles out, then you're good to go to seal it up and then recheck the coolant level. So I'm gonna attempt to do that, so we'll see. It honestly looks pretty good. We got a nice steady flow. So I'm gonna cap it up. And I'm just gonna let it run, hold the RPMs up. I don't really like bleeding cooling systems with an open system. What I do on BMWs and other vehicles is I'll take the RPMs and I'll hold it up around 2,500, 3,000. Just really let the engine warm up. Feel like increasing the water pump speed really circulates all that coolant through the heater core, and I can already feel this defroster starting to get warm, so we're just gonna let it ride, and then I'm gonna recheck hose temperatures, upper and lower, once we get this thing up to full operating temperature. It's always good just to keep an eye on the gauge, just because if you do have a big air bubble in there, it can peg into the red. Sometimes you keep the accelerator up, it'll drop down, but if you are bleeding a cooling system, just keep an eye on the temperature gauge while you do it. So the temperature gauge is just about halfway now, and I got my hand on the defroster, and before it was just kind of lukewarm, a little bit more warm than that, and now it's starting to get smoking hot. And when I know that it's almost too hot to almost burn my hand, I know that I'm starting to get really good coolant flow through that heater core, and it's starting to get bled out. So that's my usual indicator on BMWs or any other car, is with the defroster on max heat, full blast, RPMs up to 2,500, 3,000 in park. Once that defroster starts to get smoking hot, then I know. So we'll still have to go through and pull the radiator cap and recheck the coolant level after this thing gets back down to room temp. But feeling pretty hopeful about the bleed procedure. It works for me on all the old BMWs, and they can be a real pain in the ass. E39s, E36s, E38s, they can all be a little problematic to bleed. But without a bleed valve, I'm feeling pretty confident on this one. So now I can bring her back down to idle. Sounds really healthy. And I got a nice hot defroster. So I think that should be good. Let's throw this thing into neutral, parking brake on, check the trans. Right at the cool mark, so I don't think we lost enough trans to worry about it. I think we're good. All these screws are stripped out. Cleaning up the hardware for this belly pan. It's an M8 by 1.25. Just running the bolts through a quick die, and then I'm gonna tap the body where these go into. I love having a tap and die kit. They're expensive, but it's great to have. All right, let's set tire pressures and take this thing on a drive. All right, I think we're good. Let's go drive this thing, see how she runs, keep an eye on the temp gauge, go get some tacos. gonna spray down the engine bay real quick, just get all that coolant rinsed off. The chickens are trying to escape through the gate. We gotta wrangle them. You never really know if the misfire's fixed until you put it under heavy load. Guys, I just posted a Instagram reel 2 days ago. It's got over 500,000 views, and it's on the suspension on my E90, my 335i with the N54. So if you guys aren't following me over on Instagram and you want to come check me out, give me a follow, I would absolutely love it. We need to get some of the hardcore YouTube audience over there. Show your support. What I like to do, if conditions are safe to do it, is after I repair misfires, I like to find a freeway on-ramp and I like to just push the car hard. Really get the RPMs up, put a lot of load on it. That's when you can usually get misfires to happen, through spark plugs or ignition coils. It's just really pushing it, giving it a lot of load, spraying a lot of fuel, seeing if that ignition system can keep up with it. But it's feeling real good. Temperature looks good, no check engine light. Taco time, it's time to buy some tacos.
Hey, amigo.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
See you next time. Bag is secured. Go do another highway pull with this thing. Then we're gonna let her sit in the garage, cool back down, pull the radiator cap, check the level. She sounds real healthy. Let's pull her back into the garage, let her cool down. Then we'll double check the coolant level, get her delivered. Some beautiful carnitas street tacos, onion, cilantro, carnitas, lots of lime, always extra lime, plus some radish. Let's grub. Cheers. It is the next day. I checked the coolant level last night, topped it off just a little bit, checked it again this morning. We are good to go. Let's go get this truck back to my brother. Sage, load up. Good girl. That was a good jump. We made it to the shop. Here's my brother, and here's his business. This is my brother's business. So this is his flagship product. It's the scorch marker, and this was his first product. You draw it onto wood, hit it with a heat gun, and it burns your design in. Then after that, they started making a Mod Podge, sort of a decoupage type glue. This is their matte finish. This is their gloss finish, both used for crafting. He even got into the glitter manufacturing space, so he's got a bunch of different crafting supplies. This is Bear, Sage's boyfriend. Hey, Bear. Hey, Evan.
Hi. Good to see you, dude.
Likewise.
Ooh, she's so pretty. Look at that radiator.
New radiator, came with new brackets, so we swapped those out, which is nice.
Excellent.
So those are fresh. New radiator cap, just because the new radiator didn't come with one, so I wanted to refresh that just in case. Thermostat housing came off. Then we replaced the thermostat with a new seal inside that housing there. So those three 12mm bolts. And then new lower radiator hose.
Awesome.
And new upper radiator hose.
Oh.
And then all 4 coils on both banks, so 8 coils total, 8 spark plugs. This entire bank one was all hand tight, every single spark plug. None of them were torqued down, and so once I went to break them loose, like it was just, they just fell right over and came out. So could have been the potential cause of our issue. Not positive though, but it was just weird that when we swapped plugs and coils, everything just stayed on number 7. We were thinking maybe it was an issue with compression or cylinder head or something like that, but those plugs and coils were just not known good. We just couldn't trust them. And so as soon as I put the new spark plugs and coils in it, fired it up, and it was running way better. And no check engine light, things idling really smooth. I bled the cooling system, and then I rechecked it last night and topped it off just a little bit more. I checked it again this morning, and it was right up to level. So I left all the leftover coolant in your passenger seat. And so I'd recommend just, you know, in a day or two after a couple heat cycles, when it's nice and cold, pop the cap, just make sure it's up to full. Okay. And then the reservoir's filled up too, so you got all factory pink coolant. Other than that, everything else looked good. So did a compression test on the engine. because I had all the spark plugs out, and so everything was good. It was like 180, 170, 160, 170, and then on this side it was all 180 to 160, so compression was all good. I just figured since we had the spark plugs out, we might as well just throw the compression tester on it and check it.
Oh yeah. Night and day difference.
Yeah, she's idling real good. Nice and smooth, so should be driving a little bit better.
Thank you, dude.
You're welcome.
Bye, Seiji.
Okay, you can stay. All right, gang. So that's my brother Evan. He's my oldest brother, 6 years older. And he's got this craft company, Scorch Marker, where he makes wood burning pens, Mod Podge, decoupage, different type of crafting supplies, glitter. If you guys are in the crafting space, or your significant other's in the crafting space, I highly suggest you check it out. Or if you're a business owner, he also has another account, another business called Radiator Growth, where he basically documented his entire business building process, and he shares all that information with other entrepreneurs and other business owners so they can mimic and follow what he did to build a successful business, you know, going from producing scorch markers in his garage while working as a firefighter to making $1 million business and quitting his job as a firefighter. He's actually the one that inspired me to start creating content in the first place. He was the one that taught me how to do it and encouraged me to do it. So I really have my brother to thank for pushing me into this line of work and for doing exactly this, making content with you guys. So in total, I'd say we saved my brother about $1,000. The Radiator, I think we bought it for maybe $150. Markup at a shop for something like that would have probably been sold for around $400 plus 2 hours of labor at $150 an hour. So about $300, would have been about $700 for the Radiator. The thermostat, probably $100 in parts plus another hour for labor. So call that $250, so we're at $950. Upper hose and lower radiator hose, that would be labor offset built into the Radiator job. I would say probably, let's just say $75-100 for the parts on that through a shop. So let's just call it $1,000. And then 2 hours of diagnosis at $150, that's an additional $300, call it $1,300. And then parts and labor for the spark plugs and ignition coils. Let's say spark plugs would probably retail at a shop for about $150. Ignition coils, call it about $200 to play it safe. So another $350 on parts for that through markup. And then an additional, let's just call it 1 hour for labor on that. So we're at $1,300 plus $350, that's about $1,650 plus another hour of labor. We'll just call that an even $1,800. We paid $400 and some change for parts, I think about $415. So we subtract that from the price of about $1,800. I'd say we saved my brother about $1,400 if he were to have taken it to a shop to have all that work done. So this video, I really just want to serve as an inspiration for people who are not as mechanically inclined. The internet is an amazing resource, and you don't have to be a mechanic to take cars apart and fix them. I had never worked on a Toyota before. I was unfamiliar with the engine, but it is far more simple than the BMWs that I usually work on. So if you have a vehicle that needs some TLC, it needs some repairs, it's got some oil leaks, it's got some coolant leaks, I want to encourage you to try to tackle those repairs yourself. Not only will you save money, but you'll build an amazing skill set of learning how to fix various things on cars and around the home. And eventually it's just gonna save you time and money, and it's gonna build a great sense of confidence within yourself for tackling those types of jobs. Now, if this is your type of content and you enjoy this type of automotive repair, DIY type work, I highly suggest you subscribe to the channel and check out some of my other videos. I have hundreds of videos on there documenting all different types of jobs, from fuel filters and oil changes to removing transmissions and replacing torque converters to replacing turbos on my twin turbo BMW. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. And as always, folks, I'll see you on my next day off. Cheers.